محمد هو يا رسول الله محمد يا نبي الله. The prophetic habits of fasting is what we want to look at today. In general, before I go to the main theme or the main angle of what I want to talk about and how the Prophet would fast and how he would break his fast, is that for us to realize that fasting can be broken up into multiple types. We have obviously the obligatory fasting, such as this month of Ramadan that God has given to us as a mercy and as a grace and as a favor. We also have obligatory fast whenever we make a promise to God that we will, for example, fast if something happens in our life. We also have mustahab fasting, fasts that are recommended throughout the year. And this is really actually very general. So basically scholars tell us that any day of the year, other than the days where it is wajib or haram to fast, is a mustahab day. The 13th, 14th, and 15th of every lunar month is also recommended to fast. And in addition to that are the months of Rajab and Sha'ban. They are also highly recommended to fast in. We then go and we look at haram fasting because there are certain days when it is impermissible to fast. For example, the days of Eid, the day of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. We are not allowed. It is completely haram, impermissible to fast on those 2 days. And there also are other days that would be impermissible to fast, especially for the sisters. Now, when we look at the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and his family, we know that he loved the worship of Allah. He loved to worship God, not only in praying and in charity and in doing good, but also for the act of fasting. And although he had various fasting regimens throughout his life in Mecca and then in the time of Medina, nearing to the end of his life, the books of hadith tell us, such as Makarim al-Akhlaq, tell us that he would fast 3 days a month. He would pick the first Thursday of the month, the last Thursday of the month, and the Wednesday in the middle. And then he would comment and tell the ummah that when you fast these 3 days, this is the fasting of the entire lifetime, as he would refer to it as. Now, the method of the Prophet's fast, as I said, it followed a very specific, unique regiment. And equally was the way that he would break his fast. This is also done in a unique manner. And again, as believers, we'll try and emulate the life of the Prophet, even in something as simple as how to break our fast. Multiple hadith tell us in the books of history, in the books of the traditions, that he would break his fast with whatever dates were in season at that time. He liked the dates to break his fast with. And the hadith mentioned if he didn't have dates, he would use raisins. If not raisins, then he would actually just use even a glass of water. The point being is he always wanted something, ideally something sweet to break his fast with. Another aspect which we always, we obviously have to perform is the act of the pre-dawn meal, what we call the suhoor. And this, again, is another area where the Prophet emphasized and encouraged his followers to have the suhoor. Even, he said, as much as a glass of water, because at one level, yes, especially when you're fasting a long day and if you have a very difficult work scheduled or school, you obviously need the minerals and vitamins and you need the energy that the food can give you to continue out through the day. But it seems in Islam and the way that the Prophet explained it to us that the meal, the suhoor, the pre-fasting meal, the pre-dawn meal, it wasn't as much about a need to fill the stomach as it was to have a spiritual way to start the day, to start the fast. And we understand this because given that some people will live in regions of, let's say, North America or Northern Europe, the Scandinavian countries or other parts of the world where your fasting may be, from 11 p.m. you may have your iftar and suhoor may be at 3 a.m., let's say. Naturally, you wouldn't be hungry after 4 hours of breaking fast to eat anything for suhoor. But here's where the wisdom of the prophetic tradition comes in, and he says that at least drink a glass of water. And in that special time of the morning, we have various supplications. For example, the dua of Al-Baha, which is a very beautiful supplication to read in the morning before the Fajr begins. So all of these can be performed, brothers and sisters, when we keep in mind that we wake at that time, again, not just for food and drink, but also to engage in the spiritual aura that is surrounding the believers, especially in the month of Ramadan in the early morning hours. A very dire warning comes from the Prophet to remind us that fasting is not just about staying away from food and drink. We've heard this story about a woman in Medina who had a servant at home, a slave that she was keeping as a servant. And one day this woman got mad at her servant, and the woman was fasting, and she began to curse and to use vulgarities and to insult and to rebuke this woman who was working for her in her house. And then shortly thereafter, she comes to the Prophet. And the Prophet, having been given knowledge of the unseen from Allah as and when He requires it, He offers this woman a meal. And the woman says to the Prophet, "O Messenger of God, I'm fasting. I can't eat this food." And he says that what you just did to your female servant, that's the complete antithesis of fasting. Fasting does not mean you just don't eat or drink anything. Fasting means you control your tongue. You watch what you say. And so he imposed that you need to eat this food because you've broken your fast by your insults and your name calling and your vulgarities. Your fast is gone. There's no need to now just physically suffer and have an empty stomach all day. And this is where we realize, brothers and sisters, that the way of Islam and fasting of the Prophet was that the entire body would be in a state of fasting. Not just the stomach, but the eyes from looking at the impermissible, from the ears from listening to the impermissible, from the mouth from saying the impermissible. And only then can we actually be called one of those who is fasting for the sake of God. The Prophet, as I move on, would also encourage us to make du'as, again, as I said, before we begin the fast, but then also at the end of the day when we break our fast. He has a very beautiful dua where he says, a very beautiful supplication where he says in the translation, "O Allah, for you we have fasted, and with your sustenance we have opened our fast, so accept it from us." And then he says, "The thirst has gone. Now that we have had something to drink, our thirst has gone away. And the canals have become full. Our stomach was empty, now our stomach is full." And he says, "An only thing that remains is the reward for fasting." So we've been satiated, our thirst and hunger are now quenched. The burning hunger is now being quelled in our stomach. All that remains now, Ya Allah, is the reward from you. As I conclude, we ask Allah that in this blessed month of Ramadan and beyond, that we are able to fully appreciate the nuances of fasting. And not only keep away from the jurisprudential items which break our fast, but also our attitude, our mannerisms, our decorum, that we also maintain a level of civility so that our spiritual fast may also be accepted in the presence of God. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.